Bekam Minkowicz in Chasidus in Divre Rabbi Nisiyenu und sie wird sein Bekorev Mamar der Avdi David Melech Aleh Vereya Echad Lekulam bin Heira Beyameinu Mamar. Ay 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 hey.
Good evening. Welcome to tonight's special Farbrengen, which tonight we're going to be learning about Gimmul Tamuz. Gimmul Tamuz is the anniversary of the Rebbe's passing, which takes place in 3 weekends from now in honor of Gimmul Tamuz. Welcome, come have a seat. And since Gimmul Tamuz is a very, very important day on the Jewish calendar, on the Chabad calendar, and it happens to be, as you'll see from tonight's discussion, how important it is. So as a rabbi, I have a responsibility to educate you, right, about the important things in your life. And if I don't teach you, obviously I'm not doing just a great job. Okay.
Let us know how good our life is going.
It's going to be even greater and better once you're done with this class. Okay, so we are going to talk tonight about the idea of Gimmul Tamuz. Gimmul Tamuz, I mentioned before, is the anniversary of the Rebbe's passing, and Jews from all over the world, literally, travel to New York to spend Gimmul Tamuz at the Rebbe. This year it happens to be, it falls out in Shabbat, so you'll have Jews from all over the world that will be traveling to New York to the Rebbe's holy resting place, which is not far from JFK Airport, to spend, because it's in Shabbat, to spend the weekend there on Shabbat, Gimmul Tamuz with the Rebbe. And the real question is, why is everyone going there? Why are people from all over the world going to the Ohel of the Rebbe? Right? I will be going. And if you guys want to join me, you can join me. You want to send prayers with me, you can send with me. But the real question is, why is everyone going? And that's the goal of tonight's class, to be educated. What is Gimmul Tamuz? What is a Rebbe? What are Chasidim? I'm sure you heard these terms before. And what's this whole to do about Gimmul Tamuz? Okay, so in order to really understand what Gimmul Tamuz is, we have to understand what a Tzadik is. Now, a tzaddik, we know, is referred to as a righteous person. Now, we've been studying a lot of mysticism, so we know that there's deeper depths to any word that we discuss. And the source of a tzaddik obviously has to be found in the Torah. So we find something interesting in the Torah. When the Jewish people left Egypt, so God could have taken them out in many ways. He could have opened the borders and they would have walked out. For some reason, if you remember the story, detail of the story, Moses was, so to speak, God's ambassador to speak to Pharaoh, to speak to the Jewish people, to provide them with strength and fortitude and faith to be able to get through the challenges at the end, which was obviously very, very challenging and confusing, and to allow them to leave Egypt. Now, what's interesting is that when they finally did leave Egypt, so God made many miracles, and they sang a beautiful song, which we actually say in our prayers every single day. And what's interesting is what the Jewish people said. So the verse tells us in Exodus, in the portion of Bashalach, so I'll read to you inside, it says that Vayaminu b'Hashem, the Jewish people had faith in God, uva Moshe Avdo, and in Moshe, his servant. So the question is a simple question. The fact that the Jewish people had faith in God, I got it. Right? God created the world. Hi, welcome. Perfect timing. There's a seat right here. God created the world. God did all these miracles. So obviously, right here. There's a seat right here. So they obviously had faith in faith in God. But right here, that's fine. But the question is, what does it mean that they had faith in Moses? And not only that, they're calling Moses his servant. So you see, what's unique is not only did they have faith in God, but they had faith in Moses. And how do they refer to Moses? They don't refer to him as an ambassador. They don't refer to him as the spokesman. They give him a name, an interesting name. Avdo. Who was Moses? A servant of God. Grant you, great, servant of God. But what kind of name is that? They were just slaves for many years. And why are they calling Moses a servant? So obviously these are things which we're going to discuss as we go through this. And as we go through this idea. So now let's going to talk about really, so what is Moses and who is Moses? And not only Moses, but we know that in every single generation, there is a Moses of that generation. So what is this idea of Moses, and what was unique about Moses? Now, obviously, we know the technicalities, what Moses accomplished, and so on and so forth. But we're going to talk today from a spiritual perspective, what is Moses? And this will give you a whole perspective on who really Moses was, who a spiritual leader in a generation is, and why is it that people obviously cleave to a spiritual leader, and what's the connection that a spiritual leader has with people? Is he a good speaker? Is he someone that inspires people? What is the real spiritual dynamic of a Jewish leader? So in order to understand this, we're going to take a little spiritual journey, an important journey, a deep journey, into the process of the creation of human beings in this world. Right? Because you want to know a leader, you got to know who the person is. So when you look at the human being that's created and exists in this world, so you find something interesting. On one hand, everyone was created by God. You know, through the biological of parents, mother and father, a child comes out. But you find something unique that no two people are alike. This one thinks like this one thinks like that, right? 2 Jews, 3 opinions, maybe 4 shuls, right? So, why isn't it that they should all come out the same? Husband and wife, boom, everyone should be cookie cutter, same child, same brain, same emotions, etc. So it's brought down in Kabbalah and explains as follows, that God, as we know, is the infinite power. In Hebrew it's called the Or Ein Sof, the infinite power of God. God wanted to create a finite world. How do you create from an infinite God to a finite world? Now what does that mean? If you have infinite energy, so it's infinite. If you have finite energy, so it's finite, it's limited. How do you create the gap? How do you create the division between the two? So what God did, he created something which is called a tzimtzum. A tzimtzum is a contraction or concealment of energy, and there's many tzimtzumim till you finally get down to this physical world. So in the words of Kabbalah, and I'll explain what they mean. So in the worlds of Kabbalah, there's generally, and again there's many, but for this conversation there are 4 worlds that God created. What do I mean 4 worlds? 4 levels of downgraded of energy, of infinite energy. So obviously the original energy was infinite. In Hebrew it's called Or Ein Sof, light that has no end, which means an infinite amount of energy. From there, God said, okay, we got to create a finite world. He can't just all of a sudden create a finite world. There'll be a crash. So he created something which is called the world of Atzilut. Now, what does the world of Atzilut mean? The world of Atzilut means, Eitzel comes from Eitzel, close to God. It's close to the infinite power. That means in the world of Atzilut, which by definition means it's close to God, it's already a world. It's already detached from the infinite power, but it's so close to God that it's like a mirror image of it. In other words, in the terms of Kabbalah, it's all good. It's all good. Not only it's all good, it's all great. From there, God went and took a step down, created a new world. Already here you have something which is called a creation. Here you have a creation. In this world of creations, it's already more of a step down of energy. You can call it a created being. And over there, it's also all good, but already not the perfect good, but all good. You can't compare it to Atzilut. Atzilut is one with God. So that's like really, that's like the epitome of good. But in the world of Bria, it's all good.
One of the levels.
Exactly, one of the levels. Second level. Okay. Then God went and created the world of Yetzirah, formation. Now already, not only is there creation, there's already a form of it. Now, in the world of formation, according to the world of the way the Kabbalah explains it, you already have 50-50, good and bad. What means good and bad? Good is where you recognize God. Bad already is where you don't recognize God. So it's 50-50, 50-50 shot. Once you come down to the world of Asiya, that's already with the world of creation, the physical world of creation. In there, it's called the whole world bad, not in the bad of evil, bad in the sense that they do not recognize God. So you look at anything in this physical world, no, there's nothing that's screaming it's a godly thing. A table, a chair, a person, etc. You have to do an avoda, as we discussed many times, to create a godly experience. But by default, it's a table, it's a chair, it's a brick, it's a wall, it's people. Not bad and evil, it's not something which is calling out and screaming out, it's a godly thing. Okay. So that's the four worlds. Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya. Now, what happens when a soul, a neshama, which is a part of God, that comes down into this world, into a child? So it's a process. It has to go down through like a journey. I mean, it's going through a journey. Through where? From the infinite part of God. That's what neshama is, the part of God. So it's the infinite part of God. Through the world of Atzilut, through the world of Bria, through the world of Yetzira, into the world of Asiya, and then it comes into the person's physical body, and then that's who the person is. Now, in a journey, as we all know, everyone has different interests. So when the soul goes through the process, let's say through the 9 months, when the mother's pregnant, when the process starts, until it actually comes down to the physical world, what happens in that process? So it depends. There could be infinite amount of combinations where it spends its time in the journey. So let's take an extreme case. You could have one soul, doesn't want to leave God. He loves the infinite part of God, and he gets a shock. He's going to the world of Atzilut. All right, he's not in the infinite part, it's close to God, and he hangs out there. A whole 9 months. Finally, at 9 months, they say, okay, the mother's delivering. They pull him down from the world of Atzilut. This soul enters the body, and he's out into this world. Now, what do you think this soul that spent 9 months not cultivating himself to get ready, used to this physical world, he didn't want to get used to this world, and he comes into this physical world. What do you think it sees? It sees the light. What light? Godly light. You know, it's like, doesn't notice anything physical. It could be living in this physical world, but the eyes and the mind and the heart is totally from the world of Atzilut, and it only sees God and godliness. It only sees good. It's like an absent-minded professor. I mean, obviously, this is an example, but obviously it's much greater than that. Totally can't relate to this materialistic world. Can't understand what's going on to this Narishkeit. It's silly. This is a materialistic, finite, limited world. Godliness, you want infinite, right? That's an neshama of Atzilut. One extreme. Let's use another extreme, and then we'll talk about the variations. The other extreme is, as soon as there was a call, we need a soul, comes down, he didn't spend even 2 seconds in Atzilut, Bri, Yetzira, and he spends 9 months hanging out, cultivating himself in the world of Asiya, before he enters this world. And he's getting used to all the physical, right, WhatsApps and games and text messaging and computers and cyberspace, all in the world of Asiya, before he comes to this world. And materialism, cars, houses, right, boats, planes, pleasures, etc., right? Comes out to this world, he can't wait to get his toys, right? Only thing material. Talk to him about praying. God, forgot that a long time ago. The only excitement and the only real reality is physical things. Things that are enjoyable, things that are pleasurable, etc. That's another extreme. And then you have, obviously, millions of variations in between, depending on where it spent the time. Now, so what happens is, first of all, this helps you understand why people are different. People are different. The reason why they're different is depending on where they spend time in the journey. We know it's nature and nurture, right? So the nature of the soul is where it was nurtured for those 9 months in that journey down to this physical world.
So the soul isn't intact until after a certain amount of months, so it's
Correct.
Not immediate.
Yes, the process goes through a 9-9 process.
A bunch of questions and
Correct.
legalities and role versus weight.
Absolutely. Yes, correct. Absolutely. So now, but let's stay focused. Let's stay focused. It's important. I want everyone to get the concept.
After 63 years, I haven't focused once. Now
Tonight's the first night. Shechianu. Okay, let's get back. Okay, so depending on where the soul spent its time, that's where, and that's the type of soul it's going to be. And that's why certain people are more into, for example, let's say people are more like into modern art and drama and music. You know, they could have been in the world of, Yetzirah, Bria, etc. You know, it could have been on many, many levels where it spent its time. Now, obviously, for our conversation, a Tzadik, someone as Moshe Rabbeinu, or the Rebbe, or a spiritual leader who God placed in every single generation, in every generation you always have one person, you probably can call him an angel, but one human being, right? One soul in a body, a real soul in a body, just like everyone else. But this soul, we call it a neshama of Atzilut. It went through the process, but very quick. 95% of the time, we're in Atzilut. So when it comes out to this world, it doesn't get lost and distracted. You can't get him excited about anything physical. He has to live here because he's put into a body. He has to deal with the fact that he has a physical body and limitations of whatever the body is. But the body's actually very painful for him because it's limiting him for him to be who he is. Now, so because it's a neshama d'atzilut, so what happens now? The perspective of a tzaddik, of a Moshe Rabbeinu or a Rebbe, is what? Totally spiritual, totally godly. Because it's totally spiritual and totally godly, the only thing it really cares about everything, but the only thing its energy is where it's at spiritually is God. God, godliness, good, etc. Now, one might think, totally disconnected to the world. But on the contrary, a real tzaddik is not disconnected to the world. He'll use his power as a godly man to help people in this physical world. You see, so he's not disconnected, where he just wants to hang out in the mountains and meditate all day. He's in this world, in a body, but his vision is, how do I make this world a more of a godly place? How do I help people with their physical needs in this world? Because that's what God would do. We know God is Gomel Chesed, God does kindness. So because God does kindness, a Rebbe or a Tzadik will do kindness. I'll give you an example of a story. This is actually an interesting story. When the Rebbe became the Rebbe, so the first Hasidic discourse, the Rebbe said, and we know the Hasidic discourse is the most powerful part, the highest level of mysticism, and when the Rebbe would say a Hasidic discourse, he would actually say it from divine prophecy. His soul would almost like leave his body in a certain way. As a matter of fact, it's a known fact, when the Rebbe would say a Hasidic discourse, we have to hold on to something physical, because his soul literally can leave his body. So the first Chassidic discourse the Rebbe said when he became a Rebbe, in that discourse itself, he said many stories, but I'm going to share one story that he shared about the first Chabad Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe. The story that he shared about the Alter Rebbe was as follows. Now I want you to imagine this. We've all been to Shul Yom Kippur, right? The holiest day of the year. And fasting, it's a holy day, a lot of preparation, and the Alter Rebbe comes to Shul. You have to know, he was the Rebbe. He wasn't just a congregant, he was the Rebbe of the Shul. So you can imagine, let's say, he's sitting up front with his talus over his head, in deep meditation, praying for himself, and praying for his community, and praying for all Jews all over the world. And he's sitting in the middle of the prayer on Yom Kippur. Now remember, it's Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, you're not allowed to do any forbidden labor, like Shabbat, etc. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the prayer, while he's praying for himself, his family, his community, etc., he steps up and leaves. People thought, maybe he had to go to the restroom. No one asked questions. He leaves for a while. Turns out, where did the Rebbe go? It happens to be what happened, that everybody goes to Shul. Yom Kippur. You can't stay home. Everyone goes to Shul. Husbands, wives, kids, whoever, all ages, everyone goes to Shul. Yom Kippur, you find everyone in Shul. That's why, unfortunately, in the famous Yom Kippur War, they knew when to attack, when they knew everyone will be in Shul. So that's the age-old secret. Yom Kippur, where are people? People are in Shul. Where did the Rebbe go? At the outskirts of the town, there was a woman who had just given birth, and she was home, and no one was home, and she was very, very cold, and she was very, very hungry. And everybody knows that a woman that gave birth, that's cold and hungry, is pretty dangerous, actually deadly dangerous. And it's actually a law in the Code of Jewish law for a woman like that, even though normally we're not allowed to cook on Shabbat and Chag, but if someone is in a deathly situation, they might they're in Hebrew it's called pikuach nefesh. You're allowed to do anything for them for Shabbat and on Chag. And the Alter went to the house, chopped wood, made a fire, cooked for her some soup, fed her, gave her what she needed to eat, and went back to shul. Now, no one's questioning, sure, Alter did everything according to Jewish law, the lady's dying. The real question is, and it's a deep question, the Rebbe discussed this once by Farbrengen, and he said, the Alter Rebbe, think about this for a minute, is sitting in shul, Yom Kippur, praying for his whole community. What do you think he's thinking about? God, his community, etc. How is it that all of a sudden in his head, he gets a knock on the door, guess what? There's a lady who needs help. And the answer the Rebbe gives, that's exactly the point. A real Rebbe and a real Tzadik, even while they're praying for themselves, their family, their community, if there is somebody, somewhere, anywhere in the world, that has a need, even materialistic need, they're cold, they need some soup, they need some water, the Rebbe will feel it, act on it, and make sure to provide the person their need or their needs. Just one more story, and everyone likes stories, right? This is fast forward to the 7 generations later with the Rebbe. Now we all know there's so many stories of the Rebbe. There really is so many stories of the Rebbe. We read every week, from Jem puts out a story, and Chabad there's stories. There's a lot of books we have of stories, and reading stories of Rebbes and Tzadik and righteous people is very, very beneficial for spiritual growth, because it opens up your mind to a whole different level of seeing things, which we're going to soon talk about. What does it mean to see things from a different perspective? So there was once a couple that lived in Israel, and they decided one day they wanted to move away. They moved away to Tasmania. They weren't religious. They weren't involved in anything formally Jewish. They never even went to synagogue. They moved to Tasmania. In Tasmania, there was no shul. There was 30 families that would get together and just do a service, because Jews like getting together on Shabbat, Friday night, etc. And they had this one helped them with the service, this one helped them with a little Bar Torah, and then the person left, and they were looking for someone to help them. It's an island. Tasmania is an island on the other side of the world. In fact, it used to be the prisons. So someone said they heard this Israeli guy, and living in Tasmania, if you hear an Israeli guy in your mind, right away he's religious, he's Jewish, he knows the whole Torah. So they come to this couple, his name is Michael Sofer and his wife, and they say, we heard you're from Israel, guess what, our chazan just left, we need someone to help us in the services. He goes, I never was in a shul in my life, wrong guy. He said, but you're from Israel. He says, wrong guy, I never went, I'm not interested. Secular Jew. But they realized, when you're thirsty, guess what? You're going to get water. If the person has the water, you're going to get it, because you're thirsty. And they begged and they pleaded and they came back so many times. Finally they said, okay, fine, you know what? I'll make a deal with you. I'm going to come, but it's not religious. I'm just coming to help you with Hebrew, and I'll get you through it. But I don't want to get involved in these religious stuff. He said, fine, no problem. As long as you teach us, we don't care what your motive is. And sure enough, he came and he helped him out. But what happens is with Judaism, everyone knows this, that once you start studying Judaism, irrelevant for what reason, your neshama, your soul that really wants it, that's starved and dehydrated, all of a sudden becomes alive again and wants more. It's a natural thing. It's a natural thing. So as him and his wife, started to teach people, they felt great. And as they felt great, they want more of it. But at some point, they really had nothing to teach them. So one day his wife sits down and opens her eyes and just talks to God, says, God, you got to send me someone here to teach me Torah. I'm trying to teach these people. I'm not able to teach them. Please send me someone. Sure enough, she finished her prayer. A short while later, out of the blue, a rabbi shows up in Tasmania. A rabbi, with a black hat, the whole garment. And they're like, what in the world is this guy doing here? And they meet him, they start talking to him, and they tell him, well, maybe you can help us a little about, we have a little shul here, we get together. He said, sure, no problem. He came to the house, he taught her everything she needed to know to get her to the next level. She never even asked him why he came, what the story was. A while later, as they became friendly, these families, one day, this woman was speaking to this rabbi's daughter. He says, and he tells him the whole story that, with what happened, and your father showed up. She says, it's funny, I'll tell you the other part of the story. He says, out of the blue, my father gets a message from the Rebbe that you should go and help the Jews in an island off Australia, in Tasmania, that need your help. And sure enough, the Rebbe put the two together. So you see, a Rebbe, as much as he's like this neshama d'atzilut that you think that it's not related to reality, is very, very much related to reality. And really is cares and concern about every single person.
It was by shared.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes.
Now, so here's the big question. So what practically speaking, what does the Rebbe come to teach us? So we know it says that Moshe Rabbeinu had an interesting title. Anyone know what Moshe Rabbeinu's title was? Well, besides Moshe Rabbeinu, who's Moshe, our teacher, what is he called? What is he called?
Father?
What?
Tzadik.
Not father.
Moshe was called the Raya Mehemna. Raya comes from a shepherd. Mehemna is from faith. So Moshe Rabbeinu shepherded us with faith. What does that mean? Moshe Rabbeinu came and taught us faith. Now, what does that mean, faith? So first, let's understand what faith is. Faith means like this. Faith means very, very simple. We all know that God gave us a brain. We can figure things out. The right way or the wrong way. But we have a brain to figure things out. We can feel things, right? We can do things. All important, all great. However, as much as you can understand things, you're limited. As much as you can feel things, you're limited. Faith is the expression where intellect ends. That's where faith begins. Faith is it gives you the power not only to understand things, to see things. With faith, you can see the truth. Now, so therefore, since the Rebbe, what did we say before? What's a Rebbe? A soul of Atzilut. What does that mean? He sees God and godliness. We, depending on whatever level we're at, tables, chairs, boats, planes, toys, right? Trips, enjoyment, that's reality to us. We can't see the way the neshama of Atzilut sees it. We can't. We just don't have that soul. But the Rebbe's job is to come and tell us, it's all great, play with all the toys, but guess what? There's a God in the world. And make sure that when you eat, you make the blessing, because this way you'll elevate what you're eating. Make sure to spend your time studying Torah. This way, whatever you're doing will be infused with the energy of Torah. Make sure to do mitzvot. Make sure to give charity. Make sure to pray. In this way, you'll have a much more meaningful life. We don't see it that way, but the Rebbe is here to teach us that we not only should understand it, but we should actually see it. The Rebbe gives us the power and the opportunity to have faith in God, which obviously faith is a tremendous power that will allow us to connect on a much different level. In other words, like this, let me give you a mashal. Mysticism is full with mashalim. Why do we use mashal? Mashal is an analogy. Why is an analogy good? Because an analogy allows you the opportunity to do what? To see things that it's very hard to see. So there's a story told of, in the olden days, when someone rented a house or an inn or an apartment, so you paid rent. Just like today. What happens today if you can't pay? They evict you. In those days, if you didn't pay and you owed back rent, what do they do now? They want to get the money. So the pirates would have this big pit in the ground, almost like an underground house, and you didn't pay, they would take you, your family, put you in the pit. And they would send you down every day. They would send you open the pit. They would send down some food, some drink. And one day, a friend, a neighbor, a relative would have pity on you. And he would come and say, how much is the debt? And he would pay it off. And that's how you would go out. And that's how they would collect, the debt that was owed. That's the way it worked then. Okay.
It's like today.
Like the poorhouse back in England. And
there you go. There you go. There you go. Okay. Okay. Now, so what happens? So the analogy they give is like this. The mashal, the parable. So a family came, right? They couldn't pay. The pirates throws them in there. No one came and took them out. Meanwhile, another family goes down there, etc. And before you know it, there's like a whole minion of families. A whole underground world, like a whole new underground. You got it? So you're getting into the world now? So there's an underground world that was sent to the pit. Guess what? It's not a bad life. They send you food.
That's right.
They give you water. You don't have to pay any bills. Life is good.
some schmuck comes and pays the bill. Next thing you know,
yeah, life is good. Now what happened, and you start getting used to it. So you don't even pray to God to send you someone to save you. You think it's an okay life. And all of a sudden, you know, you have kids, and their kids have kids, and before you know it, there's like a whole world taking place underground. Underground, a whole life, a whole family, a whole generation. And before you know it, it's the next generation, right? And another generation.
But nobody's big deal. And
every single day, open up a ceiling tile opens, someone throws down some water, someone throws down some food, and they have a little sunlight for those few minutes, and life goes on. They stopped even looking up. They just know it comes. Life is wonderful. And here's living several generations of families. Now, reality, in the pit, they would, you know, hang out, they would make shows, they would have fun, whatever they did in the pit. That was their life. But they always spoke about life in the real world. Now, you have to realize there's several generations living there. So you have like the grandfathers, the great-grandfathers, that actually once lived in the real world. The ones that rented the parrots, the ones that knew the real world. They knew the real world. They lived the real world. So to them, the real world is real. Unfortunately, they're in the pit. And they know this is not the life, but that's where they're stuck right now. The next generation already that didn't live there, but were very close to their parents, and heard all the stories, so they didn't see the real world. They didn't see it. But they heard it so much and all the different stories that they believe it. They believe it, they understand it, it makes sense to them, etc. They never saw it. Then you have already a generation after that. They stop believing it. That's Bubba stories, made up stories. This is the real world. And to them it's the real world. What do they know from another world? They never lived there. They don't believe all these stories. Everything's taken care of them in this world. This is their world. Now, the reality is like this. In these three generations, who do you think are closer? The people that live there and the people that believe it, or both people that never lived there? Who do you think is more in line? The people that live there and the people that believe it, they're more in line. The one that doesn't believe, they're a totally disconnected generation, right? But the truth is, not so. The people that lived there saw it. The people that didn't live there, they're really both connected. One believes, one doesn't believe. One understands it, one doesn't understand it, right? But now, in irrelevant, in all these three cases, what happens if one day, right, you're living in, get yourself, right, you're into this world, and they open the door, and instead of sending down food and water, well, they send food and water too. Well, we're not going to take that away from everybody. But with the food and water, they send down somebody that actually, a new person that they haven't sent down, let's say, in the last 50 years from that world. But this person's like a real inspirational speaker and a motivator, and they drop him down the pit. He comes down, he goes, oh my gosh, I want out of here. But he knows he wants to really help these people. So he starts talking to them, not like the grandparents that told them, you know, they already gave up hope. He says to them, guys, what are you doing here? You need to somehow break out of here. You got like used to this world. You're used to this. You're happy here. There's nothing. You know what we have out there? We have planes, we have buses, we have transport. There's such a huge world out there. We can go travel. There's everything there. There's food, there's entertainment, there's people. This is like a joke. And he comes and tells them, what are you guys doing here? I mean, this is like, you're wasting your life away when you can be living a life so advanced and so developed. What's the difference between this person and the grandparents, so to speak, that are in there? Because the grandparents basically, they knew it was a great life, but they didn't really see the great life up there. This person knows the real life, believes in the life, and knows this is Narishkeit here, and knows that these people don't belong here. Where do they really belong? Up there. The same thing also, which is an analogy for our life. We each have a godly soul. We have a godly soul. The godly soul is placed into this body, and that's to deal with this physical world. So for most of us, True, the godly soul knows there's a God. But because it took the elevator down when it came down to this world and hung out in Asiya, it gets used to the world. It forgets a little bit about God. So what happens? God places in every generation a Rebbe, a leader, who, even though he's in the pit with us, he is in the pit with us. He's in this world. His soul is also in a body. But guess what? He is not letting go. He's relentless. No, guys. What's the real world? Godliness.
He's not
Why are we settling to live such a finite, simple life? Be so enmeshed in the materialistic world. There's so much more to this world. God is reality. And that is basically what a Rebbe is. A Rebbe is placed in this generation for what? So we should have somebody, should wake us up from our sleep, and to teach us not to settle for a life which doesn't have real faith and real vision. And to know what the real truth is. In other words, like for example, I don't know if you know, but like people would write to the Rebbe from all over the world. And they would write to him, issues they have, etc. So a lot of times Rebbe would say, check your mezuzahs. And a lot of times, what does a check your mezuzah have to do with the issue I'm asking about? What's the connection? Or he would say, check your tefillin, or for example, start keeping kosher. You have many, many letters Rebbe would encourage people to do mitzvot. What was the connection? The answer is very simple. What's the goal of a Rebbe? To inspire you that what's the reality of life? What makes the world tick? God and godliness. You have an issue, you got a problem, health, financial, whatever it may be. Who's the answer? Who's going to do it all for you? God. Check the mezuzah. Are you making sure the things God asked you to do is correct? It's just a wake-up call. Shift perspective. Are you putting on tefillin every day? Are you keeping kosher? Shabbat, whatever it may be. The point is, Rebbe is giving you a shift to realize what is real. What's real is God and godliness. In other words, it's not, God forbid, the Rebbe's here to take away your avoda and to give you a free ride. On the contrary, the Rebbe is here to give you the ability and to empower you to connect to God with the gifts that you have. There's a famous, I'll give you another interesting story about, to bring out the idea that the Rebbe is here to empower you to do with the gifts that you have. In other words, the Rebbe is not here, Shalom, the Rebbe is not here to get you, so to speak, to have a free ride and not to do what you're supposed to. The Rebbe wants you to do what you're supposed to. So for example, the story is like this. Famous story, but I think it really brings out the point very, very well. There was once a Jew living in Krakow. And he's living in Krakow, and he has a dream. He has a dream, because he's struggling, so he prays to God, God help me. So he has a dream that in Prague, and in the dream they show him the city of Prague, and they show him this beautiful city, and they start zooming into like a street with a bridge, and they show him at the foot of the bridge, right there's a treasure. Go to Prague, go dig there, you'll be rich, you'll never have to complain anymore, you'll be able to take care of your family for a long time. Gets up from the sleep, what do you think he's going to do? He ain't wasting a second. He's tried everything. He doesn't have a penny. He has nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. He might gain a big treasure. Sure enough, he gets on foot, and he's heading out. Everyone asks, where are you going? I'll be back. And he heads from Krakow out to Prague. And he's excited. He comes to Prague. He's exhausted. He's worn out. But he knows, listen, guess what? He finds his treasure. He's about to buy servants to carry him home in a Rolls Royce, right? Or a carriage. So that's what was worthwhile the effort. Okay, so comes to the bridge, as we all know. One problem. What's the problem? The bridge that he wants to start digging, unfortunately, is guarded because it's a very, 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 very important place, and the bridge is guarded. So the bridge is guarded, and every time he wants to go there, the soldier notices him, and he tries to wait for the soldiers to look the other way, and he tries to creep over. And he tries getting closer, and he tries to outsmart the soldier. At some point, the soldier notices him, he knows the soldier, and they finally realize, okay, we got to talk. So the soldier says, what are you doing here? It says, it's a place, you can't just go over and do what you want. What are you looking for? So he realizes, you know what? He realizes he's not going to be able to avoid the issue. So he's a smart Jewish boy. He says, you know what? I'll make a deal with you. And he tells him the whole story with the dream. He says, if you let me dig, I'll give you a part of it. Not a bad deal. This guy's in the way, right? Pay him off, right? So the guy says to him, I hear you. But you know what? The only problem I have is like this. And he tells him, last night, I was sleeping and I had a dream. And in my dream, I saw the street in Krakow. And this, and he names the name of the street. I go, oh my gosh, it's my street. And this is his house, and he describes the guy's house. It's about his house. In the house, in the kitchen, and he describes the kitchen, under the oven, there's a treasure. Am I going to go travel from Prague to Krakow to this house, on this street, and pull out the oven and dig for the treasure? No. So what are you making yourself silly? Go back to sleep. The guy goes, ooh, guess what? He heads right back home. Finally makes it home. He's exhausted, worn out, comes into the house like a madman. It's middle of the night, everyone's sleeping, grabs the stove, pulls it out, gets a broom, a shovel, starts cracking the floor, and guess what? He finds the treasure. What's the point of the story? The point of the story is the Rebbe's not here to give you a free ride. You got to dig, and you got to dig in your own backyard. The Rebbe's goal is for you to waken you up, to have faith, to see that what? That God is the real reality, but do the work. Do the work, because in your backyard, we each have treasures. Every one of us have treasures. We have treasures. Every single Jew, every single person is full of treasures. We have treasures that we're able to make this world a better place. We're able to live more of a happier and a meaningful, peaceful life for ourselves, for our families, for our communities. The Rebbe is here to inspire us, but to inspire us not to be invalids, God forbid, but to empower us to do the work and find the treasures that we each have. So now, here comes the big question I asked in the beginning of the class. So why do people go to the Ohel of the Rebbe? And people study the Rebbe's teachings and so on and so forth. So here is a very, very important point, and I'll explain it to you, and I'll end it off with a beautiful story in the Torah. The important point is like this, because ultimately, since the Rebbe is a neshama of Atzilut, a soul of the level of Atzilut, we all have souls. So our soul, we all have souls. And the truth is, every one of our souls come from the same place. Our soul and the Rebbe's soul all comes from the same place. It all comes from God. So in other words, souls talk soul language. Physical people talk physical language. But souls talk soul language. So if you have a soul that's on whatever level it's at, and you want your soul to be inspired of a different reality, and you want a soul to inspire it, how are you going to do it? You're going to talk to a piece of cheesecake? Or sushi? It's not going to work. You have to go to a Rebbe, a Tzadik, who has the same soul as you have, from the same source. Obviously, yours somehow got a little, clouded a little bit. The journey became different. Whatever you want to call the term for it. So you want to take your soul, you want to bring your soul's within you, right? You can't send it FedEx, it's with you. You go, wherever you go, your soul is with you. So you want to take your soul, travel with your soul to the Rebbe, because we know that when a tzaddik passes away, the most powerful part of a soul is hovering over his grave. So you want to go to where the Rebbe's grave was, or the Rebbe lived, or the Rebbe studied Torah. People go to the Rebbe's place where his office, where he studied Torah, his synagogue where he prayed, and you go there. So what happens when you get there? What happens? Who talks? The souls talk. And the Rebbe's soul talks to your soul and tells him about some upgrades you can take in life, and how your soul can live a more powerful, beautiful life. In other words, like this: if you study Torah, and if you pray, and you do mitzvot, that's great. But guess what? You're missing one important, key important thing. No one's talking to your soul. A soul from like a higher level. So in other words, you can study Torah, you can pray, you can be religious and everything. If you don't connect to the tzaddik, you're missing out a key component. That your soul doesn't have a friend. Not only a friend, a mentor. a mentor. He doesn't have a mentor that's on a very high level that can inspire your soul to take the elevation. And that's why we go to the Ohel of the Rebbe, we go to the Rebbe's synagogue where he prayed, or where he studied, or we have, thank God, a lot of the Rebbe's books here. So we actually, we study, we learn the Rebbe's teachings, whether it's the Chassidic discourses we use Saturday morning, or if you want online, you can go to Chabad.org or Torah Cafe, and you can listen to different lectures and classes of the Rebbe's teachings, because through the teachings of the Rebbe, that's how the souls communicate. And the soul of the Rebbe can teach you, guess what? You got to elevate it. There's more to life. Because whatever someone can explain to you, you can explain to yourself, it's intellect to intellect talking. The elevation is maxed out in the world of intellect. When souls talk, it's a whole different world that's talking. It's a world of souls that's connecting. And that can allow you to grow, your soul to grow, and once your soul's on a different level, it will totally pick you up. And you can live a whole different experience of life, a whole different level of peace, a whole different level of joy, a whole different level of pleasure. Not physical pleasure, real spiritual pleasure. Like we discussed many times in mysticism, Tainug, the highest level of Keser, to have real pleasure of life. You can only get that when the soul is in sync with the Rebbe and looking at life from a whole different perspective. And just to finish off this important point about going to a Rebbe, and it's fascinating because this is not a new concept. This goes back to the times of Moses. As we know, Moses was the first, right, Rebbe, so to speak, Vayiminu Hashem Moshe Avdo. So you find something very interesting in the Torah. So it says like this. It says that Moshe Rabbeinu, his father-in-law, Yisro, so it says that he was not there when all the miracles happened. So Parshas Yisro, Jethro opens up. It says, Vayishma Yisro Ko in Midian. Yisro, who was the priest of Midian. He was a priest. The father-in-law of Moshe. And he heard, this is the verse says, everything that God did to Moses and to the Jewish people, and he took them out of Egypt. Right? So the verse is very, very clear. Jethro hears, however he heard, right? News of those days. It surely wasn't, WhatsApp or texting or emailing, wherever they spread the news those days. And he hears everything that happened, and he hears specifically what God did to Moses and the Jewish people, and he took them out of Egypt. Right? I think the verse is very, very clear. So Rashi says, Rashi asks the question, Yishma Yisro, and Rashi says, Mashmu Shamoba. What did Yisro hear that he came? Now that's a strange question. The Torah was very clear. He heard what he did for Moses and the Jewish people. He took them out of Egypt. So what's Rashi's question to begin with? What did he hear and he came? What do you mean? The Torah tells us what he heard and he came. So Rashi answers and says, Kriyas Yamsuf, he heard the splitting of the sea, and Milchemet Amalek, the war of Amalek. The Amalek came and fought the Jewish people when they came out of Egypt. So, first of all, where does Rashi get that from? The verse says specifically that he heard that God took him out of Egypt. So here so he doesn't say he took him out of Egypt. He says something specific. He split the sea, and then he says the war of Amalek. The Torah doesn't say that. So the Rebbe, I heard a fascinating insight as follows. Rashi's question is not what did Yisro hear. The Torah tells us what he heard. Rashi adds an extra word there. Ma shmua shama uba. What did Yisro hear, uba, that caused him to come? In other words, like this. He heard, great, wonderful. But after he heard, what did Yisro do? He came. Who did he come to? He came to Moses. So Rashi's question is, why did he come? He heard, wonderful, but what caused him to come? What does Rashi say? Here are two things. The splitting of the sea and the war of Amalek. Now that's totally two different worlds. Splitting of the sea is a miracle God did. And the war of Amalek is a terrible thing that a nation did to the Jewish people after God saved them. As a matter of fact, till today we're obligated to erase the name of Amalek. He doesn't mention the fact that we defeated Amalek or anything. He talks the war of Amalek. So the explanation is brought down as very, very powerful, and it says like this. Yisro hears something strange. God, the God of the whole world, decided to take the Jewish people out of Egypt. Brought the 10 plagues. Split the sea. There was no one at that point that questioned that there's a God in the world and how great God is. At that point, the world, Pari was going around and saying, oh my gosh, God is the God. The one that didn't believe. He was going around telling everyone God is the God. Right? Kriyas Yamsuf. But then Yisro hears something else, and this really bothered him. What did he hear? After all this, the way everyone knew God is God, Amalek, a nation, can come and start up with people that God just saved, technically starting up with God. How does such a thing happen? How does such a thing happen? How do people do that? So Yisro came to the conclusion and said, oh my gosh, you know how that happened? It's very simple. Because since God created them, and the Amalekites are not connected to Moses, and therefore they had no one to give them soul talk, that guess what guys, we got to behave, there's a God in the world. They didn't have a leader like Moses. He goes, guess what? I can be the greatest guy. If I don't go get myself an education from Moses, I'll be the same Amalek. I'll be the same rebel that will rebel against God. So notice, what is Rashi saying? What caused him to come? Because he realized, guess what? You can see all these miracles, and we all experience miracles. But if you don't come and plug in with the Moshe, the leader of the generation, and you don't cultivate your soul is not educated, that there's a higher way of looking at things, you can unfortunately end up like Amalek. So in other words, what do you see from this whole story? How important it is, besides the studying and the miracles and everything. But if you want to remain high level, true, you got to study and you got to pray and you got to do mitzvot. But you got to connect to the Rebbe. Whether you go to the Rebbe, you want to send a letter, you want to study his teachings, whatever it is, make sure to stay connected to the Rebbe. This way your soul will be plugged in to the most powerful soul that exists in this world, and by that your soul will be elevated, and your soul will see things from a whole different perspective.